Big Givco here with another hot rod do-it-yourself tip. Today we're going to be changing out the water pump on the old rat rod. Had to get it 5 years, and the water pump started leaking out the weep hole right down here. Well, anyway, let's get started with this thing down here at the old dirt pour rod shop. We'll get this thing changed out in no time. Before you get started, make sure you disconnect your battery. Pretty important. You don't want somebody bumping the starter switch or something while you got your hands in there working on your engine. Yeah, there's the water pump right here. Probably can't see it, but there's a weep hole right down here. And that's where the coolant started leaking out. Stopped in to get gas. Notice some coolant dripping down here. Well, it's about time to change out the old water pump. First thing I'm going to do is get the alternator out of the way. I'll take this, take the main output wire off, disconnect the wires. Release your adjuster bolt. Get the fan belt out of the way. The rest of the bolts out here. Couple mount brackets in this mat. Pretty simple. And spacer in the bolt. And out with the alternator. Next thing I'm going to do is drain the coolant out. There's a petcock on the bottom of the radiator. Going to go ahead and loosen it and start draining the coolant. Then I like to do it down here on the side of the block. There's a drain cock right down here. There's one on each side. Most of the time they've got a plug in there. I went ahead and put just a drain cock in here for ease of maintenance. I'm going to go ahead and drain the coolant out, catch it in a container, and then dispose of that properly. Either dispose of it or save it for reuse. I think I'm going to go ahead and dispose of this. Coolant's been in there several years, so I'm just going to go ahead, when I go on with a new water pump, go ahead and put fresh coolant in it. Once you get your radiator drained and the block drained, just go ahead and shut off your drain cocks on the block and the radiator. I'm going to go ahead and pull the lower radiator hose. You're probably going to get a little bit of coolant come out of the hose, so sure and have your drain pen down underneath there, your catch can ready to catch that. Got that lower radiator hose clamp off, then just pull that hose and dump the rest of the coolant out of it, and then start pulling your radiator or your water pump bolts. A lot of times I'll go ahead and take the fan off, fanning that water pump pulley off with it in the vehicle. I think I've got plenty of room. Take the water pump out with the pulley and everything, so I'm going to try that. Hopefully it won't ding the radiator. Your last remaining bolts, and go ahead and come on out with the water pump. Go ahead and clean up any of the old gaskets or anything that were on the block. Get it ready for the new water pump to go back on. Here's the new water pump. Knew I was going to have to change it out, so went ahead and got a new one, and went ahead and painted it. It's just to match the rest of the engine. They come unpainted. This one came unpainted right out of the box. Another thing I like to check, the back of the water pump, get these bolts that hold that back cover on. I always double check those before you put it on. I have had those come right out of the box a little bit loose and have that back gasket go to leaking after you get it all after the install, so I always like to check that beforehand. A lot of times you can't get to these once the water pump's on the engine, so it's better to check them before you go on. I'm going to go ahead and get all these gasket surfaces cleaned up real good and get ready to go back on with the pump. As easy as this came apart with all the fan and the alternator bracket and whatnot on there, I decided to just go ahead and swap over the bracket swap outside the car before we put it on the engine. Just finished up swapping the fan here. Fanning up water pump pulley. Just tighten these up. I always usually go in a cross pattern and then work way around. Make sure nothing's in the bind. Yeah, notice once got the old water pump off, there's the weep hole, lower weep hole, and you can see the trail of coolant. That's no telling how long that thing's been seeping for a little while, so ain't nothing to it but to do it. I'll get this new one on here and shortly be ready to hit the rod run. Yeah, got all the mating surfaces clean, they feel good. Got the accessories swapped over on the water pump. Go back on with this little jewel. A lot of people use gasket sealer and whatnot on the gaskets. If you choose to do that, remember it's like Brill cream, a little dab will do you. Firstly, on this install here, I put just a little bit of sealer on the to hold the gaskets on the water pump, where I didn't have to fight them going back in with it. Remember, get all your bolts started before you tighten anything all the way up. Just run this one up kind of snug to hold it in place and go back in with the rest of them. On this small block Chevy here, on the driver's side, the lower water pump bolt, it goes clear through the block into the coolant passageway, so I always put a little bit of sealer on that one, and that'll keep the coolant from seeping up through the bolts. I got all the water pump bolts tight. I went ahead and put on the lower radiator hose and tightened the clamp there before I went on with the alternator. Just tighten everything up here in the alternator, getting it in place, snugged up. Always check your belts and everything. This belt looks real good. No cracks. Doesn't look worn. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. Go ahead and put your belt on and finish buttoning this up, and once you get all the accessories back on it and tight, we'll be ready to pour the coolant to it. Double check all your hose clamps, alternator mounted bolts, all your accessory stuff. Make sure your belt's tight. Go ahead and hook up your wiring on your alternator, and all your block drains or plugs are back in, or the drain cocks are shut off, radiator drain shut off. Go back in with some coolant. I've got some antifreeze here. It's already mixed 50-50. If you have just straight antifreeze, you need to mix it, probably 50-50 mix. And we'll go ahead and top off the radiator here, and we'll be ready to crank the old engine. If you've got an aluminum engine, this is an aluminum engine. It's got aluminum intake with coolant passageways, aluminum radiator. Make sure the antifreeze that you get is says compatible on all the aluminum engines. And most manufacturers recommend, when you mix your own antifreeze, 50-50 mix, to use distilled water. It helps hold the corrosion down a little bit and build up on your radiator and whatnot. So let's go ahead and get this thing topped up and get ready to touch off the powder. Well, we've got the radiator topped off. Let's go ahead and crank it up around here for a second. A lot of times, after running it for a few seconds, and come back and see like gonna have to add a little bit more coolant here, so we'll go ahead and top it off. And now we'll top it off, and we'll be ready to run it on up to temperature here. Yeah, remember, if your engine's hot, don't be pulling that radiator cap. That thing builds pressure, spray that hot coolant all over you. Okay, I started up, ran it for about 15 seconds, and shut the engine off. Topped off the radiator all the way, and then on the expansion tank, I like to leave it about halfway. That way, when we go ahead and run the engine up to temperature, and then let it cool down, if it needs any, it'll suck it out of the expansion tank. When you run it up temperature, double check all your, make sure you don't have any leaks anywhere. Just go ahead and run. I usually run it up to operating temperature until the thermostat opens up. Shut it off, go in, grab lunch or something, come back out when it's cooled down. Make sure it's cool down, pop the radiator cap, top off the coolant, and then fill up your expansion tank up to the proper level, and you should be good to go. Many miles of happy motoring. Hope this hot rod tip helped you all out. Come on, let's go on, head on out the rod run.